was a lot of focus, I'll start with you on this, Tara, on race in the last election and in appealing to different racial groups like Latinos or African Americans or what have you.
Well, I think there's been a narrative that's been spun and continues to be spun that the president is somehow seeking to divide the country by race. The reality is, and this is going to be a long-term problem for the GOP, I don't think they get it. The bottom line is the country has changed. It is continuing to change, and that's a good thing. I am a small business owner, so there are issues that are specific to me as a small business owner and to Carol as a small business owner that other people who work for corporations don't care as much about those issues. So I think it is perfectly fair game for the president to ask specific groups what issues are important to them and then to weigh those concerns of those groups. And the reality is we are different, and that's not a bad thing. And pointing that out and showcasing it and appealing to people based on what they are concerned about is not a bad thing. So I think that's where the Republicans are missing the boat. This is not about dividing. It's about understanding what issues are important to different groups and weighing them, because the president is the president of all people.
Go ahead, Carol.
I think that there's a balance. It makes me sad to put everybody in a box. I know as a woman, I hate when people call out the fact that I'm a woman. During the debates, I felt very pandered to as a woman. And I know it happens with race. It happens with all kinds of demographics, with age, economic status. And I feel like it really is dividing the country. And it makes me sad because instead of us coming together as one team and putting ourselves against everybody out there as Americans, we're saying, well, my group's important, my group's important. And a lot of times I think it actually creates limitations. When you put somebody in that special interest group, it's like, okay, well, we've checked that box off, instead of saying, well, let's look at the merits. Let's look at your character. Let's look at your excellence. Let's focus on those kinds of points rather than who you are in terms of what you look like or where you come from.
We mentioned the sort of, I don't know, the exclusion of certain groups on this. The Obama campaign sent out an email, and it invites supporters to take this survey. And there is a box for women, but not one for men. But then later, no, there isn't one for men. There's one for women. There's not one for men. But there is later a gender question that asks you to self-identify as either male, female, or other. Right. Which is great, because I assume this means transgender, but even transgender people identify themselves as one sex or the other, so I don't understand the other box. In any event, the point is, are they excluding certain groups?
Well, I think effectively groups begin to exclude themselves. They see themselves as discrete islands of people who are reflected in those characteristics. And so we all go around worrying about the sensibilities and sensitivities of women or black people or transgendered or Hispanics, and you've got to be careful about what you say.
Why is that bad?
I think it's divisive. I think it divides the country in a way that is not healthy or productive. There has always been the idea of the United States as a melting pot where people come together, they assimilate, they take on American characteristics and contribute to the American idea. I think that, Megyn, is pushing us in the opposite direction. Just the fact of being here does not mean that you're a part of the American idea.
You don't want to be sitting at the kiddie table either, and I think that that's the issue here. It's like, the Christmas, you've got the adults, the white men are the adults, and oh, you can have a seat at the kiddie table because you're a woman or you're a minority group. I want to have a seat at that big table. I know you've been a great advocate for women.
I find this interesting because I made a comment during the debates about how, oh, they were pandering to women. I mean, that was like women, 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 women. And I don't really understand why it rubbed me the wrong way, but it made me feel a little like you just said, like I'm a special interest group and I must just care about these women's issues. But then people pushed back and said, well, it's not that they're doing that. It's just that you may have another layer of issues that you care about. And is that pandering, or is it just looking to say to you, I realize you have another set of concerns and I want to address them?
The bottom line is that you can't have kids, right? So you can't give birth. So there are some differences here, and there's no problem with that, right? You can't give birth. So that makes
a wife, and he can have a daughter, and he can have other people, and he should care about those issues.
He should care about those issues, absolutely. But they're not going to be as important to him because he doesn't have to live through certain things. So I think the problem here is, what is America? America is a melting pot, and it's okay if we don't all like and love the same things, right? I mean, there's no problem with that. So my problem with this debate is that we are different. And I think you can be both. I think that you can celebrate the differences. You can choose to live your culture the way you want to live it. And at the same time, you can also celebrate the greater American culture, whatever that is. I mean, it's really Native American if you really want to get into it.
I want to get to one point before we go, because you seem to be arguing, and the Wall Street Journal seems to be arguing, that it actually has an effect of dividing whites from the others, and then can take us backward to a place that we work very hard to move on from.
Well, I think that was the suggestion in these constant references to the fact that the Republicans were too white. Again, I'm asking, what does it mean to say that a people or a party is too white? Does it mean that all of those people who happen to live out in the suburbs don't care about people of color or don't care about minorities? I think that's a false accusation, but I think it's being used for political purpose to divide those people and push them away from the Hispanics and blacks who voted Democratic.
Wait, hold on a second. Let's look at who voted Democratic. Almost 75% of Asians voted Democratic. 70% of Jews voted Democratic. If you look at blacks, 90-something+% of blacks, Hispanics, white people voted Democratic too. They may not have voted in the numbers that you're talking about. And I want to make a point here, because you said the suburbs and white people in the suburbs. Black people live in the suburbs too. Asians live in the suburbs. Hispanics live in the suburbs.
So
you're stereotyping at this very table because you're assuming that.
What about that, Tara?
What does it mean when everyone says
Republicans have said that? A good friend of mine, a Republican
strategist. What does it mean?
What does it mean? I think what it means is that people feel that the Republican Party has alienated groups of people in this country who are not white and who are not male. If you look at the committee chair selections that were made by the House GOP, no women were chosen to chair a major committee by the GOP. That's a problem, because you know what you're saying? You're saying there weren't any qualified women. She's qualified. She's not in Congress, but there are plenty of qualified women out there. If you look at boards of corporate
let him respond.
boards.
Let him respond.
Well, I don't know about whether they did that in the House of Representatives, but
they did.
The Congress is full of women. They're full of blacks, and the black conservatives, by and large, and they've come on programs like this, who align themselves with the Republican Party, get vilified and ostracized by the rest of the media. When Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State, was she celebrated? No, she was not.
If she had been,
why wasn't Condoleezza Rice?
Because
if she'd been a Democrat,
with the Bush administration.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll give you the last word, Carol.
Yeah, she was associated with the Bush administration. I think if the GOP wants to solve this problem, it goes back to creating relationships, and it can't be done in the context of running for a campaign. It means getting into the communities, reaching out to the quote-unquote special interest groups and saying that we care about you, and putting the actions ahead of the words for a long period of time. Start working on it today for 4 years from now.
Our panel, great job. Thank you all so much. Well, coming up, a potential downside to winning the lottery? You may be wondering, you may be looking for something like that after having lost the Powerball.